She had lost everything. Then a human took her hand and changed her fate. The mercy of strangers, Nyx. Valen pressed her back against the cold metal wall, each labored breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of the abandoned mining facility. Her once proud Sethian military uniform hung in tatters from her slender frame. The luminescent blue markings on her silver-gray skin dimmed from malnutrition and stress. 26 days had passed since she'd become a traitor to her people. 26 days since she'd chosen mercy over duty. She winced as she adjusted the crude bandage wrapped around her forearm, the deep purple of her blood seeping through the fabric. The wound was infected, another reminder that her time was running out. The emergency rations she'd stolen during her escape had dwindled to nothing, and the harsh environment of Corinth's surface was unforgiving to those without shelter and supplies. Should have just followed the directive, she muttered, echoing the mantra that had haunted her since that night. But even as the words left her lips, she saw again the faces of the Terran colonists, the children clutching their parents in terror as Commander Thrace ordered their execution. They harbor rebellion. Sympathizers, he had told his squadron. Every last one must be purged. But Nyx had seen the truth in their eyes. Not rebellion, but fear. Something fundamental had shifted inside her in that moment. She had turned her weapon on her fellow soldiers, creating enough chaos for many of the Terrans to escape before she herself had fled into the mining tunnels of Corinth. Now she was just another piece of discarded debris in this forsaken place, hunted by her own kind, surviving on whatever she could scavenge from the ruins of the once thriving operations. A distant rumble shook the ground beneath her feet, drawing her attention upward. Through the facility's fractured viewport, she watched, a small craft trailing fire and smoke as it plummeted toward the surface, no more than 3 kilometers away. Another casualty of the ongoing conflict between the Sethian Imperium and the Terran Coalition, no doubt. Nyx hesitated. The crash site would certainly draw military attention, but it might also provide supplies, perhaps even medicine for her worsening infection. The risk was substantial, but survival often demanded such calculations. By the time she reached the crash site, darkness had fallen across Corinth's barren landscape. The Terran vessel lay half-buried in the regolith, its hull breached in multiple places. Nyx approached cautiously, her makeshift weapon, a mining tool sharpened to a lethal edge, held at the ready. "Hello?" a weak voice called from within the wreckage. "Is someone there?" Nyx froze. A survivor complicated matters significantly. She could turn back now, disappear into the tunnels again. The sensible choice. Instead, she found herself moving closer. "Don't move," she ordered, her Terran language stilted but functional. "I armed." A man's face appeared in the jagged opening of the ship's hull, illuminated by the flickering emergency lights within. Blood trickled from a gash above his eye, and his dark skin was pale with shock. His eyes widened at the sight of her, at the unmistakable features that marked her as Sethian. "You're going to kill me anyway," he said with surprising steadiness. "At least let me die under the stars rather than trapped in here." Something in his dignity struck Nyx. "Not here to kill," she said after a moment. "Crash draws patrols. Both. Stay." Confusion replaced fear in the man's expression. "You're helping me?" "Maybe. Can walk?" The man grimaced as he pulled himself from the wreckage, revealing a lean frame in a scorched researcher's uniform. "Dr. Orion Blackwood, Terran Science Division," he said, wincing as he tested his weight on an injured leg. "And you are?" "Nyx. Just Nyx now." She gestured toward the distant mountains. "Safe place there, if reached before dawn." Orion studied her, clearly weighing his options. Why would a Sethian help a Terran? Nyx's luminescent markings flashed briefly with irritation. Why Terran question rescue? Prefer death? A wry smile touched his lips. Fair point. Lead on, just Nyx. They gathered what supplies they could salvage, a medical kit, some ration packs, and a portable energy cell. before abandoning the wreck. The journey was slow, with Orion limping and Nyx constantly scanning for patrols. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts and suspicions. As they reached the entrance to the mining tunnels, Orion broke the silence. "You're a deserter, aren't you?" Nyx's markings dimmed. "Traitor, your word is. Refused orders. Killed, own kind." "What orders?" She stopped, turning to face him fully. "Execute settlement. All people, children too." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "The Proxima outpost. I heard about it. Some civilians escaped during the confusion. That was you?" Nyx nodded once sharply, then continued walking. "Why?" Orion pressed, following her into the darkness of the tunnels. "Orders wrong," she said simply, as if morality could ever be so uncomplicated. The abandoned mining facility became their temporary sanctuary. Orion used the medical supplies to treat Nyx's infected wound, his hands gentle but confident. In return, she shared her knowledge of the patrol patterns and safe routes through the complex. "Your wound needs proper antibiotics," Orion said, securing a fresh bandage. "This is just buying time." "All we do," Nyx replied. "Buy time." They spent 3 days recovering strength, an uneasy alliance born of necessity rather than trust. Orion worked tirelessly to repair his emergency beacon, while Nyx ventured out for supplies and intelligence. On the 4th day, she returned with news that chilled them both. Commander Thrace arrived, many patrols now, searching systematically. Orion looked up from the half-assembled beacon. "How long until they reach this sector?" 2 days. Maybe less. "I need at least that to get this working." He ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving it standing on end. Even then, the signal might not penetrate the mineral deposits in these mountains. Nyx considered their options. Communication array on North Ridge, old mining operation, could boost signal. That's miles from here, through open terrain. Yes, very dangerous. She met his gaze steadily. Alternative is wait for death. That night, as they prepared for their journey, Orion found Nyx standing before a viewport, staring at the gas giant that dominated Corinth's night sky. Its swirling storms cast a pale blue light across her features, highlighting the intricate patterns on her skin. "What happens if we succeed?" he asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. "If my people find us before yours do?" Nyx didn't look at him. "I prisoner of war. Best outcome. And worst? Research subject, or execution." Orion was silent for a long moment. "That's not right." A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh. "Right, wrong. Meaningless in war. Not to me," he said firmly. "And not to you either, or you wouldn't be here." Before she could respond, an alarm on her makeshift scanner blared to life. She silenced it quickly, but her markings had already flared bright with alarm. "Patrol approaching. Not routine search pattern. They know we're here." They gathered there, supplies with practiced efficiency, but as they reached the tunnel entrance, weapon fire erupted from the darkness. Nyx shoved Orion back just as a pulse blast scorched the wall where he had been standing. "Traitor," a voice called in the Scythian tongue. "Surrender now and face justice with honor." Nyx recognized the voice immediately. Lieutenant Vex, once her closest friend in the squadron. "Take beacon," she whispered urgently to Orion, pressing her scavenged blaster into his hands. "Secondary tunnel leads to surface. I draw them away." "That's suicide," Orion hissed. Nyx's markings pulsed once, slowly. The Sethian equivalent of a sad smile. "Survival has price, sometimes price is sacrifice." "No." His decision was instant and absolute. "We go together. 2 targets are harder to hit than 1. She stared at him, confusion evident in the fluctuating glow of her markings. Such loyalty made no tactical sense, especially not from a Terran to a Sethian. More weapon fire peppered the entrance, and they could hear the patrol advancing. There was no more time for debate. "Together then," Nyx conceded, readying her weapon. On my signal, run, don't stop. As they prepared to make their desperate escape, Orion caught her arm. In his eyes, Nyx saw something she hadn't encountered since deserting her post, not pity, not mere alliance, but recognition. The acknowledgement of her personhood, her worth beyond her usefulness or species. Whatever happens, he said quietly, thank you for showing me there's more to your people than what we're taught. For the first time in 26 days, Nyx felt something beyond survival instinct stir within her, something dangerously close to hope. Ready? She asked. Orion nodded, gripping the beacon tightly. Ready. They burst from cover together, running toward an uncertain future as weapon fire erupted, all around them. Beyond the stars, We Know Dawn broke across Corinth's barren surface, painting the jagged terrain in shades of crimson and gold. Huddled beneath an overhang of twisted metal that had once been part of a mining excavator, Nyx kept watch while Orion slept fitfully beside her. Their escape from the patrol had been narrow, too narrow. A pulse blast had grazed her shoulder and Orion had twisted his already injured ankle during their desperate flight through the tunnels. They were alive, but now stranded in the Badlands between the abandoned facility and the northern ridge where the communications array stood. 6 kilometers of exposed terrain lay ahead, with Scythian patrols actively hunting them. Nyx's markings pulsed dimly as she examined her wound. Not critical, but another complication they didn't need. She glanced at Orion, studying the rise and fall of his chest as he slept. 5 days ago, she would have considered any Terran a liability. Now she found herself calculating risks based not just on her survival, but his as well. Orion stirred, wincing as consciousness brought awareness of pain. How long was I out? He asked, voice rough from dehydration. 3 hours. Need more rest. Not when we're exposed like this. He sat up slowly, checking the beacon nestled in his pack. It's undamaged, but without that array, it's useless. Nyx handed him their dwindling water ration. Drink. Plan after. He took a careful sip, then passed it back. You need it more. That wound. Scythian physiology different. Need less. That's not what your dimming markings suggest, Orion countered. His eyes, a deep brown that reminded Nyx of the rich soil on her homeworld, held a stubborn determination. Don't lie to a doctor about biological signs. Something unexpected flickered through Nyx. Amusement, perhaps, or appreciation for his perception. She took a small drink before securing the water. Your scans not mention Scythian markings indicate emotional state also? Orion looked startled. They don't. What was that pulse earlier, when I said we'd go together? Nyx looked away. Surprise. Not common reaction from enemy. Is that what I am to you still? An enemy? The question hung between them, fraught with implications. Before she could formulate a response, her scanner emitted a low warning tone. Patrol drone, 2 kilometers south. She extinguished their small heater. Stay still. They remained frozen as the mechanical sentinel passed overhead, its sensors sweeping the landscape. Only when the drone disappeared beyond the horizon did Nyx release her breath. They're tightening the search grid, she observed. Night travel only now. Orion nodded grimly. What can you tell me about this communications array? Will it be guarded? Abandoned 3 cycles ago when ore depleted. Minimal security, automated only. If systems still function. And if they don't? Nyx's markings flickered, the equivalent of a shrug. Then die here instead of there. Orion's lips curved slightly. Your optimism is truly inspiring. Optimism, luxury of secure worlds, she replied, but there was no bitterness in her tone. Here, only reality matters. Then reality is we need to move as soon as dusk falls. He hesitated, then asked, Nyx, what happened at the Proxima outpost? The full story. She was silent for so long that Orion thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Was elite scout in Thrace's squadron. Trusted. Loyal. Her markings dimmed with remembered shame. Settlement suspected of aiding rebellion. Orders to secure and interrogate came first. Then, new orders. Extermination. Make example, Thrace said. Orion listened without interrupting, recognizing the weight of confession. When entered settlement, found no weapons, no resistance, only farmers, teachers, children. Nyx's fingers curled into fists. Thrace ordered execution anyway. First family brought out. Mother, father, two small ones. She met Orion's gaze directly. Something broke in me, or woke up. Turned weapon on squadron instead. Created chaos. Told Terrans to run, then ran myself. You saved lives, Orion said quietly. Took lives too. My people. People who were about to commit atrocities. Nyx's markings pulsed with conflicted emotions. Not simple. No, he agreed. War never is. After a moment he asked, "What about you? Why scientist in war zone?" It was Orion's turn to look away. I wasn't supposed to be. My research team was documenting ecological damage from the conflict. Neutral work, approved by both governments. We were promised safe passage. His jaw tightened. Someone decided we'd seen too much. Sethian ambush? I don't know. The attack came without warning. Could have been your people. Could have been rebel forces trying to make it look like your people. He rubbed his face wearily. Does it matter? Everyone else was in the escape pods. I stayed to pilot the damaged ship away from populated areas. Noble, Nyx observed. Stupid, he corrected with a self-deprecating smile. But I couldn't live with myself otherwise. As dusk approached, they prepared to move out. Orion fashioned a crude brace for his ankle, while Nyx plotted their course. The distance to the communications array would take them through a ravine once used for transporting ore. A natural bottleneck, dangerous but unavoidable given Orion's injury. They traveled in silence through the growing darkness, hyper-aware of every sound. The moons of the gas giant provided just enough light to navigate by, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Twice they froze as patrol drones passed overhead, and once they were forced to hide in a crevice as a ground unit marched past, close enough that they could hear the soldiers' communications. Commander Thrace demands the traitor alive. 1, soldier said. The Terran is expendable. Nyx's markings dimmed to near invisibility at the mention of her former commander. Orion noticed her reaction and placed a reassuring hand on her arm. The first voluntary physical contact between them. She stiffened initially, then relaxed, allowing the touch. By midnight, they reached the ravine. The walls towered above them, jagged metal and stone forming an oppressive corridor. The footing was treacherous, with abandoned equipment creating obstacles they had to navigate carefully. "Why help me?" Orion asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. That first day at the crash, why not just take supplies and leave? Nyx considered the question as she helped him over a fallen support beam. Same reason turned on squadron, perhaps. Cannot unsee humanity once recognized. Even in a Terran? Especially in Terran. Your people deemed soulless by Imperium propaganda. Easy to kill soulless enemy. Her markings pulsed softly. But seeing eyes, hearing voice. Harder to deny personhood. That's the most Sethian thing I've ever heard, Orion said with quiet admiration. Your philosophers talk about the sacred, recognition of consciousness in others. It's actually one of the things our cultures have in common. Before Nyx could respond, a blinding light flooded the ravine, accompanied by the whine of engines. Above them, a Sethian combat shuttle hovered, its searchlight pinning them in place. Traitor Valen, a voice boomed through amplifiers. Commander Thrace himself. Surrender the Terran and yourself. There is nowhere left to run. Nyx pushed Orion behind a pile of debris, her weapon already drawn. Communications array half-kilometer ahead, can you run? He grimaced but nodded. Not fast, but yes. When say go, run straight ahead. Don't stop, don't look back. I'm not leaving you, he protested, Nyx's markings flared with frustration. Not request, Orion, order. Beacon must reach array. Troops were rappelling down the ravine walls now, pulse rifles at the ready. Thrace's voice continued to echo. Your actions at Proxima have been classified as temporary insanity, Valen. Surrender now and rehabilitation is possible. Lies, she muttered. Go, Orion. Now. To her surprise, instead of running, he grabbed her face between his hands and pressed his forehead to hers, a startlingly intimate gesture that mirrored a traditional Sethian farewell. I'll activate the array and come back for you, he promised. Hold them off as long as you can. Before she could argue, he was gone, limping rapidly toward the end of the ravine where the communications tower rose against the night sky. Nyx turned to face her former comrades, a strange calm settling over her. She had been running for so long, perhaps it was time to stand and fight instead. Her weapon hummed as she charged it to maximum capacity. Commander Thrace, she called out in the Sethian tongue. Still hiding behind your soldiers? Some things never change. A tall figure stepped forward, his captain's insignia gleaming in the searchlight. Thrace looked exactly as she remembered, imposing, his facial markings elaborate with rank and lineage. I trained you better than this, Valen, he said, genuine regret in his voice. Throwing your life away for a Terran? Not for a Terran, she corrected, for what's right. Right? He scoffed. You've been contaminated by their simplistic morality. The Imperium sees beyond such limitations. I've seen what lies beyond those limitations, Nyx replied. There is nothing there worth preserving. Thrace signaled, and his soldiers began to advance. Take her alive, he ordered. Nyx fired, striking the ravine wall above them and sending debris cascading down. In the resulting confusion, she darted between cover, drawing their attention away from Orion's direction. She managed to disable 2 soldiers before a pulse blast caught her in the leg, sending her sprawling. Pain radiated through her body as she dragged herself behind a fallen transport. Her weapon was almost depleted, and blood, darker than a Terran's, pooled beneath her. Had Orion reached the array? Would his people come in time? It hardly mattered now. She had given him his chance, just as she had given the settlers at Proxima theirs. Surrender, Valen, Thrace called. You're wounded and outnumbered. Nyx prepared her final stand, charging her weapon for one last shot. But before she could emerge, the night sky erupted with light. Not searchlights this time, but the engines of descending vessels, Terran vessels. Alliance forces, a new voice, announced over speakers. Sethian patrol, you are in violation of demilitarized territory. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. The communications array had worked. Somehow Orion had not only activated it, but managed to describe their situation accurately enough to prompt an immediate response. Thrace and his soldiers scattered, retreating back up the ravine walls toward their shuttle. Within minutes, they had disengaged, unwilling to risk an official incident with Alliance forces. Nyx lay back, her markings pulsing weakly as blood loss took its toll. She had almost resigned herself to dying when familiar hands gently lifted her head. Still alive, just Nyx? Orion's face swam above her, tight with concern. Unfortunately, she managed to reply, your people came. They did, and they're taking us both. Alarm flared through her. Cannot go to Terran space, will be under my protection, he interrupted firmly. I've already briefed them on what happened at Proxima. You're being granted temporary asylum while they investigate. Nyx wanted to argue, but darkness was encroaching on her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness fled was Orion's determined face and the gentle pulse of her own markings reflecting in his eyes. She awoke in a sterile medical bay, the hum of a Terran vessel surrounding her. Her wounds had been treated with technology far superior to anything in her makeshift medical kit, and for the first time in weeks she felt no pain. Orion sat beside her bed, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. When he noticed she was awake, relief washed over his features. Welcome back, he said softly. The doctor says you'll make a full recovery. What happens now? She asked, her voice rough. That depends partly on you. He leaned forward. You've been granted temporary protected status based on my testimony and pending investigation of the Proxima incident. Some survivors have already come forward to corroborate your actions. And after investigation? Refugee status, possibly. It won't be easy. There's prejudice on both sides to overcome. He hesitated, then added, I've requested assignment as your cultural liaison, if you want. Nix studied him, this Terran who had somehow become essential to her survival in ways that transcended the physical. Why? Because I've seen beyond the limitations too, he said simply, and I think what's there is very much worth preserving. Her markings pulsed with emotion she was only beginning to understand. Hope, fear, possibility. She had lost everything when she chose mercy over duty, her rank, her people, her identity. But in that void something new had taken root, something that defied the boundaries of their separate worlds. Together then, she said, echoing their pact from the tunnels of Corinth. Orion smiled and reached for her hand. The gesture was small but profound, a Terran and a Sethian bridging the space between stars. Together, he agreed. Outside the viewport, the vastness of space stretched before them, no longer a battlefield, but a horizon filled with uncertain promise. They were both far from home, adrift between worlds that had taught them to be enemies. But perhaps, Nix thought as her markings pulsed in harmony with her heartbeat, they could create something new in that in-between space, something neither of their worlds had imagined possible.